Okay, so as we do every week, just reviewing our culture of being fully present to what's in front of us, respect for everyone that has come today from our different parts of the world, different backgrounds, and the determination to do the work that is coming to us. So thank you again for joining us. As we remember, always our two practices of cultivating humility, because this is the underlying principle that is required for us to really absorb this knowledge that is coming to us, is remembering the good others have done for us, trying to stay in that space of thankfulness and gratitude, and always trying to remember sometimes the bad we have done for others, and that always keeps us in the space of wanting to improve and be better. And then the two things we should always try to let go of are the feelings that have come when others have done bad to us, and what good we have done for others, just so we don't have too much of an overestimation of ourselves. And as we always do, to start the session off, to maximize our potential, we give thanks to our teachers and everyone that has come before us today to gather. So I'll just go ahead and lead. Om Gyandimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksur Ummilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangu Langete Grim Yat Kripatam Aham Bande Shri Guru Dinataranam Vanchakalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sunda Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So as we always say, I was born without knowledge. My spiritual teacher has opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge, and I offer my respects unto them. The second is, I offer my respects unto my teachers, that their grace turns the dumb into eloquent speakers, enables the lame to cross mountains. And finally, I offer my respects to all of you, the seekers of the divine, who can fulfill the desires of everyone, because you are full of compassion for all living beings. So thank you so much again for joining this week. If you recall, basically, I'll just start from where we were from the last week, but we're in this section just as kind of a zoom out. We're in this section of Sankhya. So we said that Sankhya is that knowledge that yields sharp discernment. And there were three main teachings of the Sankhya wisdom. The first, as we've gone through, is remembering who we are, that we're much more than these physical bodies. We're souls that are on this, that are always seeking happiness. But, the soul, living at the level of soul means we're also not, we're not anchored or always pulled by our story, is another way to think about it. But in addition to understanding ourselves, it's also important to understand the world around us and the energies that are naturally functioning at all times. And so this is where we are in this chapter, understanding the terrain. And specifically under understanding the terrain, we've been looking at, if those that remember, we've been looking at these gunas. So we define gunas from this book, Yoga and the Dark Night of the Soul, as ropes or something that binds us, right? And if you remember, these three energies of nature are goodness, passion, and ignorance. And the analogy that you could really think about is that if you think of the three primary colors, red, blue, yellow, there's always mixing of these energies, like there are the mixing of the colors, to give us really an unlimited variety of combinations of each. So although we're looking at them in very distinct, separate categories, to also know that at all times the energies are mixing. And one of the great things about doing these sessions early in the morning is that it's very much influenced and predominated by the mode of goodness. And as we said, these are the characteristic features of the energies of the goodness, passion, ignorance. And I just have another different analogy to remember these. But goodness is, if you can think of it, it's understood, like in other versions of the Gita, it's explained that goodness usually starts as poison, but in the end tastes like nectar. And so what that means, that poison means that often the mode of goodness requires hard work, it requires sacrifice, it requires some endeavor to, it requires something difficult. So it's a pain in the beginning to gain in the end. So again, that progression from poison to nectar, whereas rajas or passion is something where it's sweet, really sweet in the beginning. So you get, potentially a result very quickly early on, but then in the end, it fuses out. A very simple example of this is any relationship that started off amazing, you thought was going to be the one, and it fizzled out, right? That's usually the mode of passion. And tamas, or the mode of ignorance, is what you can think of as it basically is poison in the beginning, poison in the end, but sometimes at best it could be masked as illusory happiness. So a lot of times when we are, for example, a very simple example is like intoxication, right? Whether it be drugs or alcohol, there is potentially at the beginning a certain sense of happiness, but again, it's under a false pretense where something else is, governing that situation. And so it's neither really good in the beginning or in the end. So again, just a different way to think of those three energies. And usually when you think of anything positive that's happening in your life, it's nice to be able to think, okay, did I start this out? Did I start something out in the mode of goodness? Am I sitting right now, potentially in the mode of passion where it was like, quick into something and, things are going well right now. So again, and recognizing, according to the Gita, and I think most of us have realized also, that majority, like 90 plus percent, even close to 99% of most people are existing, in today's world in that rajas or passion. And, so we've been talking about, different elements of what we see and observe, what they look like in the different modes. So we're just going to continue on, because we started off by talking about communication. We talked about what our predominant energy of communicating was. And then last week, we really went into action and what action means, because again, the Bhagavad Gita is very much a book of action, meaning you can't really derive much benefit from always just sitting still and doing nothing. There is a role for that, but it's not going to be, for most of us who are engaged in this world, it's not going to be one that's practical. So we have to, act, we have to move, and how do we do that in the best way possible? And so what we're going to do now is we're going to move into some other things to look at. We're going to talk about knowledge, we're going to talk about sacrifice, and we're going to talk about charity and what they look like. So this is a little bit of information on the element of knowledge. And we have knowledge in very much different areas, but the Bhagavad Gita really categorizes what knowledge looks like in the different areas. So in goodness, knowledge actually takes one closer to the truth, right? And so there is a divine aspect to this, where to the absolute truth, or closer to divinity, that's knowledge and goodness, right? And the second point is that it gives rise to a vision of unifying oneness among all living beings. And so that's why we're always talking about this element of compassion, because this quality of compassion, it's very much a quality in the mode of goodness, because it requires all of us to see each other as brothers and sisters, as people who are all on a similar journey. Again, there's a unifying principle to compassion, and again, that comes that is a quality of goodness. And then the third feature is it's an undivided spiritual energy within all bodies, and what that's referring to is that although we have different external appearances, different bodies, different genders, different titles, that soul is that spiritual energy that makes us, that levels out the playing field, that makes us all equal. So that is, and that reminder that we're the soul and not the body, that is really the knowledge that that is like the first principle that the Gita starts on when Arjuna and Krishna are speaking on the battlefield. When Arjuna doesn't want to fight because he's against all his family members, Krishna opens up with this first piece of wisdom that we're in fact much more, again, he goes back to reminding Arjuna who we are, right? We're actually much more than these external coverings. And so this is, again, what knowledge looks like in that mode of goodness. When it's in the mode of passion or rajas, so there's a sense of speculation, and people have doctrines, theories by which one sees the body as a self. So again, what that is getting at is that the body and the spirit are the same thing. And we know very much, we've gone through repeatedly that, through different stories, that again, we're trying to separate these two elements, the body and the self really referring to the spirit, right? And that point about consciousness is a byproduct of matter, right? In fact, consciousness is there before matter is present. And so again, there's this exclusion of this existence of the individual soul. And again, usually that the knowledge in the mode of passion, again, there's a predominant focus of the body being the self, right? So pretty much the machine or the car that I've been given is of utmost importance. And if you recall the story of the bird in the bird cage, that was really getting at, it was trying to help us move past the cage and focus on the bird, and that bird is the soul that's within us, right? And then finally, knowledge in tamas or ignorance, it's very much unrelated to anything connected to the absolute truth. It's seeing one as, one's endeavor or effort, that's kind of all in all. And usually it's just considered, it's on the level of just the bodily comforts, right? So, the four things that animals and humans do that are a slave: eat, sleep, mate, and defend, right? And so that's what makes humans and animals similar. But what differentiates the human and the animal is that although both have souls, the cognition that the human has been offered has been there to inquire, right? Inquire about self-realization, what is our purpose? And so to be able to do that inner journey, that's what moves us out of the mode of tamas. So if we're really just doing all the basic bodily comforts, then it's understood that we're not living much more of a sophisticated life beyond the animals, right? And that's why it's understood that usually life of the animals, although they understand relationships, they're not in the animal form. They're not able to actually do that inquiry and that journey of the soul because of the state that they're in. So that's knowledge in the three energies. Does anyone have any comments or thoughts? Again, this is going a little bit further than what Simon had put in the book, but again, when we zoom out, then we can see that most of the energy that we are acquiring, perhaps on a day-to-day basis, that we're learning about, it's usually in tamas and rajas, but cultivating and always that knowledge in goodness is also very important, because it's in one sense we're trying to increase the average. All right, I will move on to the next. So this element of sacrifice, right? So the Bhagavad Gita talks about both sacrifice and austerity, but we're going to just focus on sacrifice today. So what does sacrifice look like? Because again, we're all working hard, we're all sacrificing to some extent. So sacrifice in the mode of in the energy of goodness where one is performing one's responsibilities because they ought to be done without attachment to fruit. So we said always, there was a whole section in the book that talked about letting go of fruits, right? And so it's really, attachment to the fruits, that's the characteristic, that is a prime characteristic of sacrifice in the mode of passion, right? So where we do our responsibilities, because we want something to gain. And so sacrifice in the mode of sacrifice is giving up one prescribed responsibilities because of fear or because they seem troublesome, right? And so a lot of times that whole fleeing or moving away something that is our responsibility, kind of running away, that whole element of running away, that's usually in the mode of passion because it's not comfortable at the time. And tamas and ignorance, sacrifices giving, again, always having to do with responsibilities, giving up one's prescribed responsibilities because we're under illusion, right? And so under illusion, if we remember, anger, resentment, all those different predominant qualities that we talked about, if we remember, lamentation, moroseness, self-pity, resentment, these are all reasons why one gives up certain responsibilities in the mode of ignorance, right? So this is very much, when we're talking about sacrifice, we can easily look at what impels us to endeavor and to sacrifice, and again, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong if we are situated in passion or rajas, because there may be a specific purpose. But again, if we're looking to move up or try to situate ourselves in a higher energy, then trying to do things for the sake of doing things, rather, like, for example, I think one of them that's a very easy example to relate to in goodness is parenting. So having children, right? You don't necessarily do we don't raise children or parent children because of some sort of attachment to what we're going to get, at least probably in, for months to years. Maybe I'm sure most parents have the idea, like the ideal that their kids will support them if they get older. But again, generally, the whole idea of parenting is usually in the space, the energy of goodness, because it's a responsibility that we're doing, and not really thinking about what result we're getting out of it. So again, that's just one, small example. Does anyone have any thoughts or comments on that?
Ricken,
Please. Yeah.
Just in the word sacrifice, and I think we spoke about that last week, but when you hear that term, already it kind of gets this feeling in your body, right?
Mm.
It's like sacrifice. I'm going to lose something, or it's going to be so hard. Like that's just automatically what comes to my mind. Or I've got to be a martyr. Like I've got to do so much. Like it's so hard to sacrifice something. How can we change that? Like what's a good pseudonym or or synonym for sacrifice that doesn't seem to grasp so much? Or maybe, I don't know if others feel that when they hear that word sacrifice.
Yeah, I agree. I was, Palak and I just last night, we were talking about, I'll show you if I can find, to me, like another word that is, I'm not sure if people have heard of the word like austerity or being austere. Mm-hmm. So one of the places where this, or at least in general, like worldly sense, where this word austerity is used is fiscal austerity. So fiscal austerity refers to this term where it's usually used in the context of, or at least recently it was used in the context of European countries that were very much bankrupt or broke. And so they were basically the European Union said there has to be a period of fiscal austerity. And that I think of austerity. Sacrifice has a certain permanence to it, versus austerity means that it's time bound. So we need to discern how we have to discern for a period of time. So it's time bound on how we're choosing to, in one sense, use our resources, whether it be time, energy, anything, in a very specific way for a longer term benefit, right? So both words, again, they're similar, but I think what differentiates austerity and sacrifice is basically the fact that sacrifice to me implies that there's no time bound. It's something you're giving up forever, and that's why it brings up a sense of challenge within us, versus being austere to me involves more discernment that's for a period of time.
So Stacy's comment, the delayed gratification, kind of goes a little bit with that, like that it's time bound a little bit.
Yeah.
Like it's not an all or nothing, like forever.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think delayed gratification is definitely a good way of putting it. I think most of us are sacrificing on a daily basis, but we don't usually think about it as a sacrifice. I'm not sure what people think about that, but yeah, I think it's usually a term that I feel like it's a term we use when we're always looking back on something. So I've sacrificed, over a period of time for this, or, for a specific purpose or reason. And I think usually what we mean is that, again, that austerity, is referring to, again, if we go back to that just concept of fiscal austerity, where you have to be very discerning and choosing of how resources are spent for a period of time. We usually take on austerity for periods of time rather than sacrifice, but this is definitely one for discussion. Stacy?
I feel like that's a mode that I'm trying to get out of, right? Because it's kind of like you're waiting to feel joy. You're like, okay, right now I'm doing all this, and later it's going to pay off. I mean, I feel like that was the mode that I was in, like, for a long time when I was in corporate, right? And now that I've left that situation, I mean, one of the focus that I really have is to be present and just to try to appreciate today, right? So it's like my son is autistic, so sometimes that's a little bit of a challenge, right? But at the same time, it's like that's what I'm, one of the things that I'm put on earth to do is to work with him. I feel like, so I just need to be joyful, and it's like eventually, hopefully, things will all be better, right? But I mean, it's all about today and what I can appreciate today, and not feel like I'm sacrificing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's a really, I mean, to me, like what that's representing is, in many ways that is goodness, because if we remember, there's a certain sense of presence and mindfulness. Sorry, I stopped the screen share, but just going back to, the features of goodness, again, there's tranquility and there's mindfulness or presence in a given situation, rather than, most of us are always wondering, kind of lamenting the past or worried about the future, right? And so that time to be, that presence of the moment, that's in fact goodness. So even though that's taking things, day by day, I think, when we look at these energies, there's very much like we can look at it we can look at it on a macro scale of like when we look at the timeline of our life. but then we can also bring, the energies can also come into our day-to-day life on a moment-to-moment basis. And most of it really comes down to what kind of consciousness we bring to each activity or whatever we may be doing, right? So again, trying to, again, the reason why this model is so powerful is because you can zoom out with it, but you can also zoom in and look at the details as well. And so, as we probably always say, like, life is in the details. And I mean, it's amazing that you're able to, try to move into that space where you're seeing something as, where you can see something as, in one sense, the world happening for me rather than against me, right? That also is, I think, like a space of, of goodness, where there's not always a sense of like, of regret or, a sense of being like lamenting or moroseness, which a lot of times drives our action. So, no, I mean, that's amazing. It really is. Anyone else have anything else to share? And again, I just wanted to bring up the main features, because I mean, to me, Stacey, what you were talking about again was a sense of, was in goodness, whereas we're trying to, approach whatever is in front of us with always just trying to be present, right? And even that is, takes a lot of practice.
I do have a thought on that, Rick. And so in terms of the poison turning into sweet nectar, I do believe that personal growth does require a lot of hard work and dealing with, like right now, I'm dealing with a difficult situation in a condo building where the other board members basically come from the worst of the three environments in terms of how they're approaching things. It takes a really lot, takes a lot of energy to be able to manage my own emotions and come from a good place. And I do that not, and it's actually funny because yesterday my daily motivator thing said something along the lines of, whether you come from a position of control or leaving control, God is always present. So I walked into a very difficult meeting going, okay, you know what, let's just go with the flow. And that is not necessarily my natural state. And it took a lot of effort, but I'm sure that the outcome was much better, knowing that, there is a universal God or however you want to label it, guiding things that are beyond our individual control. And I do believe that that requires intentional sacrifice in the moment, day to day, in order to find that growth. That doesn't mean that you're not grateful and that you don't appreciate every moment. It just means that when you have those difficult times, you do spend the energy. And in order to spend the energy, you have to do the work in terms of reading and journaling and meditating and doing all of the things we know are good for us. So I don't think you can have one without the other.
Yeah, no, I agree that, trying to, the space of goodness always requires, it always requires effort and endeavor in the beginning, but it's always trying to, and it speaks to what Stacey was saying, that, you're always waiting for something, better to happen. But I think, if we can get into like, that's also, the space of like being, waiting for the fruit or the result. That's like the motive passion will usually, it's hard to always stay in that space also. Like if we're not enjoying, if there's not a sense of like purpose and fulfillment in the journey along the way, that's not only, it's coming within myself and not needing like everybody else around me to tell me, that this is good or that is good. Like there has to be a certain self, and that's what we're going to get to soon enough, is like, what does it look like when someone has kind of crossed over, these three modes, is that there's a certain sense of like self, fulfillment, where then, you're not always waiting for that next result, because sometimes, you're waiting for a long time, as Stacey said, and it can get tiring as well. So just to kind of like fuse, what you were saying, Paul, with what Stacey had mentioned. Yeah, I think most of us are on the journey that we're on, not because someone's patting us on our, patting our back every day, but there's a certain sense of we feeling that there's progress and, there's a self-fulfillment that comes with the endeavor.
Yeah, I love that, Paul. Like one of your phrases, that intentional sacrifice in the moment. And it brings back that phrase to me, is it better to be right or to be kind?
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, when you spoke about this experience, that you go in and you intentionally sacrifice your word, your speech, to say, okay, it's kind of like, I surrender here because the universal good will come. And they've basically got to figure it out for themselves. But if I just kind of surrender a little bit, it can happen. So that was a wonderful example. Thank you. That was really triggered it for me. Yeah.
It is. And I think a lot of times, Paul, when we go into situations like this, we, there's no doubt we're going to want an outcome. But I think, what that was an example of is if we let go, the outcome will come, but it won't come the way we think it's going to come, because we usually are, we're usually attached not just to the outcome, but how it happens too. And although it's fine to desire a specific outcome, the how, meaning, like that's where I feel like the control element comes in, where we want to control how it happens as well. I mean, I've had several outcomes now, come that have come in its own time when I've, not expected it. It's what I was desiring, but it came in a completely different way than how I thought, I wanted it to unfold. And so I think, just speaking to what Tiffany was saying, that, there's, if the desires there, no problem, but that, the process of how it happens, letting go will change that how. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Toril, Rima, anything to share? All right.
I had a question on the knowledge piece for the goodness one, where it said absolute truth. What does that mean?
Yeah, so the absolute so basically the absolute truth it's a term in the Bhagavad Gita that's used to refer to divinity or God. And so basically knowledge that brings us closer to God, or another term that's used to describe divinity or God is the absolute truth. And so that's specifically a term that's used in the Bhagavad Gita. So it's referred to God. So the last section that I wanted just to discuss was charity. And charity, we're always in the spirit of giving, and it's nice to look at how the energies categorize charity. So charity in the energy of goodness is it's performed willingly as a duty and at the proper time and place. So it means we're also giving consideration to where we are and what time it is. And there's no expectation of return. So I think a lot of times when something is given, again, in the mode of passion, where most of us usually reside, is that we're performing something for something in return. And a lot of times people want some type of recognition, some mention, call out, name on the board, building named after me on the plaque, all those things. That's usually charity in the mode of passion, because there's some desire for results, or even in a grudging mood. One example that came to my mind that was brought with Pollock is, when you're at the grocery store and at the very end you're asked to donate to a charity, and sometimes you're just like, oh, okay, just like I'll to me that's sometimes in a we don't give like freely, but because we feel pressured or forced to, we give, and that kind of grudging mood is in that situation. And then in tamas or ignorance, charity is seen as improper time, improper place, improper individual, and it's done without respect. So a lot of times, sometimes we also give in times where, again, our motive or, our intention is not proper. And so, again, we're sometimes, giving to the wrong individuals, or improper individual would refer to, let's say, someone who's not necessarily trying to, do good for, humanity, right? And so always looking at, time, person, and our intention. Again, that's what I wanted to, to bring out with this element of giving. Again, and charity can look in very much in different ways. It doesn't just have to be monetary, but looking at, these three factors of time, place, person, and our specific intention. Any thoughts or comments on this? Have people thought about this when they're in this, when they're giving in charity? Again, whether it be for, monetarily or not, it could be, we give our time in charity, we give, time leads to so many other things. It's support, it's, it's a helping hand, it's so many different things. But again, just looking at how we, can we approach a conversation, even a conversation, like, let's say meeting someone new, it's like, okay, I want to, I want to ask this, I want to get this out of the conversation, rather than, like, as Stacy was saying, like, coming to just, be present and open to, what comes up. So yeah, I like looking at, I really, the element of charity is a really, looking at it based on the three energies is really powerful, because it really can help us change the intention by which, we're choosing to give, and really will try to, push us into, choose to push us into goodness if we're thinking about it.
Regan?
Yes.
So for me, like, charity, in the Bible, they use charity and love as the same kind of word. And that whole no expectation of getting anything return, that's what I try, because I'm in a newer relationship. It's kind of that concept too that comes. It's like, I'm loving for the sake of loving, and that it's not that I need to get that back from him, but love for love's sake, right?
Yeah.
And just to kind of be that way without expectation. So
Yeah.
it can be in many different contexts.
Oh, for sure. Relationships are the, like, I feel quintessential, part of our life where we can see what our mindset is, right? Even for people that, let's say, even if we're looking at siblings or parents, how do we relate to them? Is it always, is it always with a desire to gain something, or, what's the motive, right? So it's a really powerful way just to kind of step back and look at, how we are giving of everything in our life, right? And again, there's no problem to recognize that we may be potentially in tamas or rajas, but at least, we know that there's a spectrum and we're working towards, a place where we want to be heading. I think that's, again, the main thing is that we're recognizing, and, now that we have more awareness, we can hopefully make a better choice. So, and then the last, part that I wanted to just touch on, and, we can just talk about this as a group, but, I wanted to just kind of reflect on different, different things. So there are other, like, other things in life you can look at. So for example, food, like food and goodness gives us strength, health, happiness, satisfaction. The Bhagavad Gita talks about food in the mode of passion. You know, it has specific characteristics. It's bitter, pungent, hot, dry, and it tends to, you know, cause disease, right? And then ignorance, it's, you know, it's decomposed, it's putrid. You know, so food is actually really broken down to in terms of what modes it resides in. So even, I mean, the Bhagavad Gita has a really high standard for food in the mode of goodness. It's food that needs to be eaten within the first 3 hours that it's cooked, right? So it's basically, you know, you're looking at a life of no leftovers. You know, if we're really trying to, no, really, a life of no leftovers, if you're looking to, you know, eat food that's constantly of the highest, best energy, right? Because what happens is that, you know, like everything, there's a sense of, you know, if things start to, you know, we know everything potentially in our fridge, there's a sense of like things being, you know, we put in a fridge to avoid it from decomposing, right? And anyways, I just wanted to, again, because food is something that impacts our life so much, just, you know, stepping out to see how, you know, how we eat, what we eat, and you know, the time and when. And then as we were discussing last week, times of the day, for example, that mode of goodness really is in the early hours of the morning, right? So generally 12 to 8 is considered goodness. Passion is, you know, when we're supposed to be active, and usually those are the working hours, 8 to 4. And then ignorance is usually that in the evening, as again, in this context, rest or sleep is important. And so again, you know, there's specific activities that are meant to be done at certain times. Yes, Toro?
So I love the fact that you gave the example of in the Bhagavad Gita, right? They tell you that the food has to be eaten within 3 hours and stuff. So especially in an Indian family, right? Especially when you come from a family where mom loves to cook and all of that stuff. I feel like that example is so perfect and great for even just the fact of trying to find, right, the balance of sattva, rajas, and tamas, because you always want there to be the proper amount of food, but at the same token, there also should never be less food, right? You want to make sure that no one ever feels that they can't have more than they want, or there should be the amount that is proper. So I feel like that just that one example is almost like, okay, so that's what we're trying to find in life, right? That balance of, okay, I figured out that this is the proper amount. I'm not going to have leftover and it's not going to go bad. So I love that example.
Yeah, no, thanks. No, thanks for sharing that. No, food is such a, I mean, I'm thinking about this all the time. I mean, you know, Rima knows that, you know, we're always, you know, we love going home because we'll be able to eat in the mode of goodness, right? You know, my mom usually always sends us home with leftovers and we embrace it every time. It's not like, but again, as we said, you know, if we look at the primary colors, there's always going to be mixing of the modes, and that's okay. It's, you know, it's what we choose for a specific the time and the circumstance that we're in, right? But it's nice to have ideals to, you know, to strive for, and also like once we're also cognizant of maybe something we've been doing and we had no idea that, oh yeah, you know, this was like, I'm just always, you know, consuming mode of like passion or ignorance, you know, then we have the choice to, you know, to also make a shift too. But yeah, food is such a prominent, you know, example. So I had to bring that up. Thank you. Anyone else have any thoughts or comments? I just wanted to, there was a few more things that we can just talk about as a group, but I mean, if people had to talk about, for example, you know, like let's even look at something like parenting, right? Like what does parenting look like in the 3 different energies if we were thinking about it? You know, based on what we know.
It's like the conscious parent.
Yeah. exactly.
and the goodness.
That's
Yeah.
definitely, the conscious parent is definitely the, the parent in goodness for sure.
Mhm.
And to me, like one of the, sometimes hallmark features that can come out as parents, like it can be very much in the mode of passion, because there's a sense of wanting to control, right? Like the kid must do this, so that's this result, is like the, this result is the outcome, right? Rather than potentially, goodness would be, okay, like what are my, child's like strengths and weaknesses, and what are they potentially like inclined to do that best serves their, their strengths, right? And then, parenting obviously in the mode of ignorance would be, I think what happens very commonly, sometimes it can be quite harsh, demeaning. Sometimes there can be, sometimes there can be abuse, both verbally, physically. Those are all like parenting in the, in the mode of ignorance. But again, just wanted to, just even for us to think about that, just parenting, how that falls into different energies. Any other things to add on parenting? Or where they, have experienced, again, if we look at, if goodness is mindfulness, tranquility, wisdom, again, like going back to our first, like, our first principles of each, anyone else have anything to add on parenting? Yes, Stacy?
I think it also relates to some of the other things on your list, like your house environment, your
Mhm.
spiritual practices, because it's very hard to be, at least I've found, to be in goodness when it comes to parenting or even engaging with anyone, right? In any way, if you don't have some of that grounding, right? So you don't fill your cup, and you don't have the meditation and the good environment and things, because you just don't have enough energy reserves to be at your best self, to be able to make that possible.
Yeah, and that's why I always say, like, what we do in the morning time, it's really like putting on the armor for the daily battle, right? Like, would you ever consider going, would you ever consider going into like a battle without any protection? No, right? It sounds like, it sounds crazy, but that's sometimes like our life gets so busy that, it can happen for periods of time, over long periods of time. And so that's sometimes also like a lot of, most people can reflect and say, like, they're the space they're in for parenting, it also just usually reflects where they are with their own like well-being. So yeah, just that investment, and like you said, filling that cup on a daily basis is really crucial for parenting and really anything else. So how about this is a really fun one to talk about. How about driving? Driving in the different modes.
Well, it's pretty easy for me in Bermuda. So the speed limit on this island is 35 kilometers an hour.
Okay. Yeah, so that's
It's
such
funny.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I'm just going to say, because from a perspective, there's one, we have very little roads. So on a busy morning, it can take you half an hour, like for me to get to my work. But I'm like, still, it's a half an hour, like, and it takes usually 10 minutes, but if the traffic is bad, but it just kind of comes into, I think, like it is very much your perspective based on these sorts of things as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always think, if I had to think of the ideal, driving in goodness, it would be, at least in Canada, we have this driving school called Young Drivers, right? The bottom line is that driving is safe, right? It's safe. You're generally following all the rules. You're taking all the precautions. There's a certain sense of planning and foresight, right? When we're driving. So that's how I see driving goodness. Passion is where, probably most people are. Like you think of passion, like I think of like speeding, cutting people off, honking, like all of these things, like, that's where I think of like with driving in that spirit of passion. The need to like get somewhere and, like get somewhere now. And then ignorance, I think everyone has seen this, at some point in their life, but ignorance would be like where then it starts to lead to anger, like swearing, certain sense of like, I think like tailgating, I think is now moving from passion to probably ignorance, right? So things like that to me is what I see driving. And again, simple, a simple daily function if anyone drives. But again, we see how these energies come up. And we know that when we are, let's say, early and, going somewhere relaxed, that we're definitely going to probably be in the mode of goodness. We're going to let someone go, let someone come in when they need to, not cut someone off. Again, simple things, but like taking a very simple, a simple activity and looking how it looks like in, different energies. Anyone else have any thoughts, comments to add for driving? But you're right. The speed limit being at 35, Tiffany, is a great way to stay in the mode of goodness. Yes, Gabrielle. Good to see you.
Yeah. Oh shit. Sorry. Now my daughter is calling. Just because I'm on the mobile. I cannot see you yet. I need to just get her because she needs something from me, but I'm back in a minute.
No problem.
Destiny. Oh, now she's gone. She's gone. She will manage. She will manage this. It's very important what happens because it's letting go.
Yeah.
Parenting. Yeah, it's about letting go. And that's actually what I want to say about driving also, because in Germany, I used to love to drive very, very fast. I'm happily, I never get aggressive in the car, which I observed with other people, but I like to drive faster. And I think it's also an expression of everything. If you want to be further, be faster where you want to go. So I love to drive fast, but you will miss a lot on your way when you're driving too fast. And as slowly as you drive, as more you're in the present moment. And so now I enjoy a lot more to either drive slowly or just drive with a bicycle, or even better, just to walk. Now I'm observing myself as doing just the opposite like I used to do before. And it's my way of, let's say, observing myself and the world as well by doing things and understanding why I did it that way and then doing it the other way. Maybe it also has to do something with the age. That it's nicer if you know you have to household with your energy. You're not going on full speed all the time. So I think driving is a good example for the whole life. That's what I wanted to say. And no wonder I'm born in Germany, because sometimes we love to do things very fast and very efficient. They have to be very efficient, but actually love don't want to be efficient. Love wants to be just love. It doesn't want to have a meaning. And so I'm quite happy that I went already through a lot of darkness to see the light more clearer. That's what I want to say. And thank you very much to all of you that I am accepted to be most time invisible, because I'm really, especially in the moment in my life, I like to be invisible. Before in my life, I also know about myself that I was very expressive. And when I'm speaking, I still am when I'm speaking, that I'm very expressive. But in a moment, I also do a lot of work with myself to step back, to be invisible, to be just with myself. But I also want you, that I'm always with you in my heart and in my thoughts. This is why I want to participate without being too much noticed. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabrielle. No, we know you're there always, and it's nice to have you though in person too.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rick, thank you so much.
So I know we're running out of time, but again, I just wanted to go through a few of these for us to be able to kind of take the model, think about it in different, in different environments or different maybe categories or areas of our life. We won't go through the other ones because we'll pretty much end here, but where we'll start off next week, and the end of this chapter really gets at this question. And this is a question that Arjuna, at the end of the 14th chapter of the Gita, which is the chapter on the energies, he's like, what are the signs and behaviors of one who has arisen above these three energies? And how does one transcend these three? Because one thing that people have to remember is that goodness, even the mode of goodness, is also a rope, right? It's also something that binds us. So in the Bhagavad Gita, it actually talks about a whole nother category called, so sattva is goodness, Shuddha sattva is pure goodness. And so it actually talks about a whole new category of pure goodness. And, that's actually where we're striving for, because even goodness has its, even goodness will bind us, right? And so if people want to, at least refer to the last part of the chapter, we'll pick up there at the end. And it's really nice to be able to then talk about the individual who's transcendent and what that looks like in day-to-day life. It's a really nice, it's nice for reflecting on. So I just wanted to leave everyone with this question, which was where we'll pick up next week. But any thoughts or comments before we finish? Again, trying to choose some topics with refer to the energies, environment, like Stacy was saying, our environment's a really important one to, also dissect. But it's nice to be able then to take this model and apply it to different elements of our life. It makes it super practical and at least gets us to step back. And, again, like I said, this, the whole purpose of this book is about transformation. And once we have recognition, then we can make better choices. So again, this model is all about recognition of where we're at, not trying to feel, bad about where we're at, but really just recognition to be able to move around. And again, dissecting these three things in the three energies, they're always there. And it's it's a combination of these energies at all times. But we can definitely, work towards, we all have something to strive for, which is nice. Thank you so much, everyone. We will see each other next week. And very thankful. It was great to be with everyone. And so we're going to move on. We'll start off pretty much with that last question and then move on to the next chapter.